right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Texas Pinball Festival 2025 seminars. Today, we're going to be talking all about custom games, homebrew games, and kind of discuss the origin story and where it is today and how you can get involved in building your own game. So with me, I have Jerry Stellenberg from P3 Multimorphic and Aaron Davis from FAST Pinball. And first off, I just wanted to say, one of my first pinball shows was Texas Pinball Festival, and it was 2015 or 16 that Scott Denisi brought his Whitewood Total Annihilation. It wasn't Total Nuclear Annihilation at the time. And seeing a game in that kind of basic state at the beginning really just opened my mind to oh, there is a whole process in creating that. And I believe it was the same year Jerry was there with his multimorphic platform with Lexi Lightspeed, and it was just whoa, what is this? Where the whole play field is a TV screen with the flipper mechs and other mechs floating on top, and everything was interactive. And that just sent me down this whole rabbit hole of seeing pinball outside of just the basic what manufacturers are doing in the industry. These kind of custom, more passion projects turned into really big things. And so thank y'all for joining me, because both of y'all play such an awesome role in building that kind of maker space for a lot of people. So I just wanted to have you guys do quick introductions of who you are, in case anyone here doesn't know what you have here today, and then where your roots in homebrew and kind of stuff like that came from. So, hi, Jerry.
Hi. Can y'all hear me if I sit up? Yes.
Do you want?
Or do I have to lean into the
You
mic?
should trade. There you go. Give her those. There you go.
Oh, thank you. That's nice.
Hey.
So I'm Jerry Stellenberg, founder of Multimorphic, creator of the P-Rock board system. Started in pinball in college in '97. Got addicted. Started designing stuff because I'm an engineer, and kept designing stuff and still design stuff, and happy to help other people design stuff too.
Awesome. And Aaron, how about you? So Aaron is with FAST, and the past few years we have been working together across all different pinball shows across the country to help curate the homebrew and custom games and create an actual booth space for everyone to inhabit together and talk about their games. So, Aaron, tell us.
It's the homebrew home base that
Homebrew
shows
home
up with these
base.
shows. I just want to say first, this is the first time we've ever been on stage together before. So this is a big moment in pinball.
Hi, Aaron. We actually don't mind each other. It's
Yeah, we're civil, we're friendly. We always go seek each other's projects out. It's good. I love this. So when this came up as a topic, there's a side of, well, first off, Aaron Davis, Fast Pinball. We make electronics for building pinball machines. But I think that Jerry and I, when you create tools and resources for people to go and build things with, I mean, that's a unique role, I think, in these things, because everybody can go on and dream up their own cool project, but the ability to create the platforms to build upon to create great things, it's kind of this so many steps removed. So a lot of times it's just a lot of work to create a lot of potential, and then you sit back and hope something great gets created. And I think fortunately we've both seen a lot of really great stuff created with the things we've produced. So I think that's one of the big, I guess, those are the bonding factors, is to be able to stand back and look at great creations and stand back and say we were a part of this, even if it's way back behind the scenes. I love seeing that stuff come to life. So, but yeah, I got into pinball to make stuff. I think that what was attractive to me about pinball was the idea that it was a kinetic experience, an art project in a literal box. There was definition and parameters that said this is what pinball is. And so the attraction, I got into pinball as the maker movement was kicking off. So the idea you could go to these magical spaces that had all these cool tools and build cool stuff with it. And that was what was attractive to me as far as trying to build a platform to do that stuff. So.
Awesome. So when I talk to homebrewers, they're I'm either using P-Rock system or I'm using FAST system. Why are you shaking your head?
You said P-Rock. I said yes.
Yes.
You said fast. I said
I also
I was like, is
acknowledge fast.
that wrong? And then, so that's where they're talking about like, oh, there's like some competition or whatever. If you talk to everyone in the community, there's not really a competition between these guys. They're just silly. And it's really
And bald.
silly and bald.
Silly and bald.
Very genius creative minds, which is why they're up here. And so for me getting into it, like what I remember is like P-Rock was kind of like the first and only system that we had available to make homebrew games. Can you talk a little bit about that?
The history. So in 2009, I came up with an idea to build a machine that had a playfield-based LCD and tracked the position of the ball as it rolled over the screen. No one's done this before. It's cool. Why is it a painted piece of wood? Why can't we put something cool in the playfield? And I'm an electrical engineer, so I attacked it from the electrical engineering side, and there was nothing I could go buy off the shelf to help me create this machine concept I had. So I had to design my own board. So I designed a board to interface to switch matrices, to interface to driver boards, to bring in all the data I would need from the circuits that would need to track the ball. And then I'm like, how do I test this board that's used to control pinball machines without pinball machines to use to test it? So I designed it in a way that it was compatible with Williams and Stern machines at the time. This was 2009, so it was pre-Spike. It was Sam, I think
Yeah,
the Sam
yeah.
and White Star it was compatible with. So I had 13 machines in my home at the time and designed this board that could literally plug into every one of them. I could write software for those games, retheme those games, but really those machines were a test bed for the board that I designed to build my own machine. And it kind of grew a life of its own because I was talking about it on the forums and people were asking if they could get a hold of it, and people like Scott Denisi and Dutch Pinball, Kuhn and Barry wanted one for a project they were doing, and I met a guy named Jimmy Lippum who wanted it for a project he was doing, and it just kind of snowballed into a community of people who wanted to create pinball games. That was the origin of the P-Rock, and I think it was the origin of the initial homebrew movement.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that same year Scott brought his Total Annihilation. Jimmy, you had Wizard Blocks, which was like a Pinball 2000 game that hadn't been fully made, and then he used the P-Rock system and everything to get that fully functioning, which was also super mind-blowing to see. And so Aaron, now you're heavy in the homebrew scene. Jerry is building games for the entire world, doing this huge manufacturing. Congratulations on Portal being here this weekend. It's super cool. So Aaron, when people are using fast boards, how did that start for you?
Well, for me, before I got into pinball, I did software and created software platforms. So the idea of building things to be used by many different people in many different ways and see what could be spawned from that is kind of in my DNA. So when I had been burnt out on software and needed something else to do, the attraction to the physical world development was in front of me there. We were very involved in the Northwest pinball community and arcade community and stuff. And so I eventually connected with Dave Beecher, who's an incredible engineer. And he's one of those rare engineers that wants you to know everything that he knows also, because maybe that increases the amount of things you can create together. So everything that I learned through engineering and through electronics was through him. But I think it was very fun to apply kind of my platform background to physical goods. And so as we did that, our goal was to say, can we just make stuff that we can nail the pinball-based requirements for, and then create manageable ways to expand that, to create integrate motors in ways that you don't need to no custom drivers and things like that. You can just plug it in and send some basic commands and make stuff move. So the idea of like building upon the traditions of pinball, but to bring new tech in and make new tech more accessible to creative people. So the idea of like, treating pinball like a canvas or a theater stage, like what story would you tell on this stage? That was really my big driver. And we were coming into this stuff, like I said before, like at the beginning of the maker movement. So we all had our Arduinos controlling RGB LEDs and all sorts of fun stuff. And so I think that there was a lot of inherent interest in the idea of like, what could I do with this new 3D printer that I got, or this CNC machine that's at this makerspace I can use. Really kind of got right into pinball right in that same time, and it's been amazing to see like what's developed not only from the hardware side, but like by the time we came around was like when the Mission Pinball framework came around. And initially, like I've probably told you the story before, it was like somebody called me up and goes, "Hey, we can port their framework to run on our system or on the FAST system." I was like, "Hell no, that's gonna be so much drama. I don't want to deal with any of that." Then when they came back and were like, "Hey, we're gonna make a software platform that works on everybody's hardware," and I was like, "That's really cool," because the idea that like you could go and learn how to write software and have options and stuff like that for hardware, I thought was really cool, But I think that more than anything, all of this stuff was just the incentive was to selfishly get more people creating pinball so that we could play it and enjoy it. So that was kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you made a homebrew pinball machine yet,
Me?
Aaron? Yeah.
I've tried a couple times. I made a fold-up one that flies with me on the plane. That's been the most in depth. We got a few different starter projects and stuff, but most of the time I spend is like helping people create their projects and stuff. So there might be, a bunch of need for like, hey, we want to use this DC motor driver or something like that, and we'll look down our to-do list of all the things we want to make and be like, okay, let's move this one up the list because then they can use it in this project. And then you have people in the field like testing that out. We send boards over to Anthony to be like, hey, can you make this work with MPF? And it's really fun to see how people push those limits and things like that.
Yeah.
So.
Super cool. How many people in here are wanting to build their own pinball machine? Like, raise your hand. Nice. Awesome. So,
Another one.
Do it again.
So what are kind of like the first steps that we would need to get into, and like what kind of advice do you recommend to us if we're starting to go on this journey?
Man.
I would say that we all bring a specific expertise. We're all good at something. Something drives us. For me, it was electronics and software. For other people, it's mechanical. For other people, it's the audio visual. Or for others, it's artwork. Everyone's got a hook that brings them into this. And that usually drives their desire to create a machine that leverages that hook.
Yeah.
So start with that hook. Leverage that hook to conceive how to create an awesome game that makes that thing look spectacular or function spectacularly or whatever. Building homebrew machines is not easy.
Not for the faint of heart.
So pinball machines, as you all know, are multidiscipline, complex things. They have everything. They have hardware, software, video, audio, artwork. It's you have to know a lot of stuff, and none of us know enough of all of that stuff to build a machine. So we leverage the community. We leverage friends. If you have a friend who has a passion for pinball or just wants to help you succeed at a project, maybe they have an expertise that you need. But just start with what drives you. Start with what you're passionate about and go from there.
I think that's spot on. Like I always say, everybody's hard part is different. There's some people that are like software wizards that look at you cutting a piece of wood going, how did you make that cut straight? And I think that's one thing that I always like seeing is how people kind of band together, and sometimes it's fun to take a break from your own project to help somebody else with theirs. So we used to see a lot where somebody's trying to figure out how to model something in 3D to print a certain thing they wanted on their game. And somebody else will raise their hand and be like, just give me the dimensions and where it needs to be made up, and I'll model it really quickly for you, 3D print it, and send you the file. And I think that's one of those areas where, like Jerry said, like the disciplines it takes, it's every discipline, And I think that anything you can do to minimize the number of things you need to be an expert on right from the beginning is better. And that's where you see like a lot of people starting with retheming pinball machines and stuff like that. They're not solving geometry. They're focused on rules and gameplay experience. Others are more excited about like there's a certain mech I want to make, and I've got it modeled in Fusion, and I'm gonna like send an order that's got a bracket on it, and they're gonna iterate on that like a dozen times and build their box of send rejects. They get up to like $8,000 or so. It's like a lot of money gets spent on metal. But I'm saying, like, I think that the idea that like you're gonna need to do all of the things, don't let that be a blocker. You know, the idea that you can follow the things you're excited and interested about is the main thing. And there'll be others that want to rally with you. And like if I know there's like my sick obsession at homebrew is wiring for whatever reason. I love like creating nice tidy wiring and stuff. So if somebody's got a good complicated project, like I would love to hang out. We can order some dinner and like wire up a game, you know? Because
you
if that's
flew
the thing
across the country to help Kyle Reed wire his crazy. How many coils did he have in that game? Like 50 coils?
We had to extend our default like driver set to like have more in there.
You're like,
but
sure, I'm going to come hang out and wire with you all weekend. This is going to be the best party ever.
I had a window of time between like incoming and outgoing shipments and stuff, and I had some frequent flyer miles. And I said, hey, if you have a coffee table I can sleep under, I'll come out and give you a hand. And I think his response was like, I'm a grown-ass man with a job and a house. I have like multiple guest rooms. You can come and stay. And it was actually a blast. He ended up like smoking a brisket. Some people from other homebrewers in the region came out to visit. So I think that the idea of getting together and doing things, like people find a way to help out, even if it's just like cheering you on, you know. So.
Word. Like how would we decide which route to go? I guess it's like all theme based and stuff. And one of the things like for me, Jerry, I don't know what do you consider your third party platform like homebrew and custom games, or is it kind of cataloged in a different way? Like if I were to design a game that works with the LCD screen and everything like that, like how do I get into that realm? Because that's really awesome. And if I'm not a super mechanical person, but I'm software driven, like that's just a huge Pandora's box to open of creativity.
Right. So you just what Aaron and I were just talking about is getting involved in a homebrew design and attacking it with your passion and basically creating a machine from scratch. The P3 system that we've designed is a machine that we create games for, but it's also open so other people can create games for it. We call it an open platform. And we have a development kit that you can just go on our website. It's free. You can download it. You can install it on your computer, and it includes a simulator that will simulate the hardware. It includes the graphical environment. Well, you download and attach it to the graphical environment, the Unity game engine, for those of you aware of Unity. Mm-hmm. It's a software-based system that allows you to create the visuals, the software, the game rules, all the things you need to get your machine or game, in this case, running. The dev kit includes all the hardware specs for playfield modules if you want to create a playfield module. Oh, wow. It's got all the specs for the shapes of the artwork that you can attach to the cabinet. It has everything you need to get started, and you can simulate your project. It includes what we call a skeleton game or a sample game that is a very basic structure of a game. If you compile it and put it on your machine, it'll run, it'll play. You can play a 3-ball game that you flip the ball around and it drains and it counts to the next ball, and you get to the end of 3 balls and it says game over. And it's got some very basic functionality. And you can literally take that structure and we say we did all the boring stuff, all the stuff no one wants to do, and then you just fill in the fun stuff. You fill in your game rules, you fill in the game content, you add your theme to it, you add your images and your sound effects and stuff, and turn that into a game. You can do all that today without any hardware, without any physical expertise. You can just download it, install it on your computer, and start developing.
That's really amazing. I had like 50 questions flood into my head from that because I'm like, yeah, I want to go to this. I guess the biggest one is like, what type of like computer hardware would I need to be able to run that software? Because when I was like falling in love with this, I'm like, oh yeah, this is gonna be so easy. I'm gonna like open up virtual pinball on my computer because it's free. That's a visual pinball. And then just like my computer crashes and I can't even like get the software to run. Like, what do you advise for specs for us to be able to get to that next step of actually it running and playing smoothly, so where we can see it running virtually?
So anyone who's developed a set of logic, a set of control system parameters to create actions in response to switch events or things that are happening on a pinball machine knows that the processing power required for the operation of a pinball game is minuscule. You could run it on any tiny processor. A little microcontroller can handle most of the needs of a pinball game in general. The processing needs grow when you start adding visuals and audio. So if you want to develop a game like, there's a reason I'll reference this, a game like Pong, the old Atari game, the original Atari game, because they didn't have the processing power to do a lot more than that. If you want to develop a game like that, you need basically nothing. But if you want to develop a fully real-time rendered 1080p or 4K graphic engine-based system, then you need a lot of processing power. So the processing power needed is based almost solely on your visual needs. Audio needs some amount of processing power too, but so for the P3 we have an Intel. It started out as a Pentium. It's a Core i3 now. It has a low to medium powered NVIDIA video card to drive the graphics. It's not super powered, but it's more powerful than any pinball machine anyone else is developing because they don't have the needs to drive multiple 1080p screens like the P3 has. So any off-the-shelf computer can handle it these days. Any laptop, any mini computer, they can all handle it now.
Kind of go for like a gaming laptop, and it should, in theory, have all the specs I need.
So you could simulate way more than you would ever want to put on your machine on any modern laptop, yes.
Nice. And then what about like the inner workings of the pinball machine? Like I know in like the early days, people open up their cabinets to show us inside, and they have like a giant computer inside that's running everything. Like, is that still the best way to do it, or is that like what is that process? And I'm talking about this in like a complete noob state. I know nothing of homebrew, so I'm gonna ask these questions that
I'll throw out real quick.
Might be obvious for y'all, but we're all new.
But Jerry
here.
said about like it's all the multimedia like experience that really sets the requirements for the CPU. Like you can run a pinball machine on a postage stamp, like a notepad, physical paper probably would run it. But the idea that like if you have got really intense graphics, real time processing where stuff is really dynamic, that's just a lot more horsepower and stuff. But I think a lot of times where people go too far the other way sometimes is they start their first game going, I'm going to put it on a Raspberry Pi, and it's like, okay, you've got unoptimized code, like, some bloated frameworks and stuff like that might like need a little more refinement. Like, don't start your first game on really limited resources. Like, everybody's got like an old laptop around, that would be plenty to use. And I'd say like the exercise of distilling your game down and hardening it so it can run on some more like affordable, like, specific hardware, that's a secondary task. Like, don't limit yourself right out the gate,
Yeah, more so than that, the most people use computers. Everyone uses computers these days. It's very easy to go to the store and grab a new computer or order it online or whatever. It's also easy to order a Raspberry Pi or a microcontroller or whatever, but in order to get that Raspberry Pi running custom code, you need to have some familiarity with building operating systems or installing them and configuring them and interfacing those to your applications. All that stuff doesn't matter. You don't need to do that. So the reason most of those homebrew machines had big computers in them are because the people weren't low-level computing experts. They were people that just needed a computer, so they got what was convenient to them, and they understood how to work it, and a lot of them were running Windows or easy-to-use operating systems, and it was just easy. It was a step they didn't need to worry about.
Yeah. I just thought the big meant more power and like, oh no.
You can throw more like RAM, CPU, all that stuff at it, and the garbage collection is going to be more efficient in the background so that your memory leaks are going to be more manageable. And then they'll find that you move it to another computer and things just don't work like they did. That's what we hear a lot of times too, is like, I got my game working perfectly on my work laptop, and then I put it on another computer I had, and things just didn't work right, you know? The OS management, driver level stuff, all that stuff is just, you know, for most people attracted to making pinball, like we talk about like the different core competencies and stuff like that, that's a whole other subset. That's like a Jimmy thing, like OSs and drivers and all that building and stuff like that. I'm just like, whatever, you got it, man. But I think that like that's just the thing, is like the attractiveness to making games. Like we have unlimited bandwidth and CPU power and memory these days relative to original pinball. You know, so I mean the resources it takes to do it is like we all have an old laptop or computer around that would be more than adequate for your first homebrew game.
Right. So I start with my design concept, and then I imagine that I'm drawing it out, right? Is that like the next step? I draw out a play photo, what I want to see. Like, what should I do next? How do I get the proper tools and hardware and software to navigate?
I mean, that's like
this?
a huge laundry list of things to do. You
Yeah.
know? I think that like the thing that I always try to like highlight and focus is like, what is that thing that like you wake up in the morning excited to go work on? You know, as you're kicking on a new endeavor that's got tons of stuff to learn, tons of new tools to buy, like all that kind of stuff, like find the thing you're actually stoked about, you know? And a lot of times that's like this new mech that I want to make because I've stood over pinball machines and nobody's made this one thing that did this. I want to make that exist, you know? And that's a good driver for like, okay, well, what do you actually need to do that? Do you need to have a physical play field to do that? Is it just a software solution, you know? I think that if you've got that guiding idea or concept and stuff like that, like start with that. You'll also see other people too approach it, and this was like when I met Kyle Smet with his Friday the 13th game. He was the first guy that said, I said, where did you start with your game? And he goes, narrative. And I was like, wow, like be so focused on the story that you wanted to tell that you had to create the landscape for that story to be told and that game experience to have. So really whatever gets you like excited to work on the project is the thing. But I've yet to find the one thing that I tell anybody to start with like regularly.
I mean, yeah, starting with your passion sounds like a great tip so you don't get burned out.
That's the answer to every question today.
It's the pro tip 101, right? Because then you'll get burned out super fast and then you don't want to do it anymore.
Well, something's driving you to make the project, so
Yeah.
start with that. I mean, even when we design commercial games, sometimes we start with the story of the game. Sometimes we start with, well, we have a theme. Let's just start drawing playfield ideas. Sometimes we start with the theme and discuss game rules first and then design a playfield around it. There's really no recipe for creating a pinball game. You have to do all the steps, but even if you start in one order, you might come up with some rule ideas and then develop a playfield around it and then start implementing the rules on that playfield and you're like, oh crap, I just had a better idea, and start the process all over again from a different angle.
3 weeks go by, and then you get back to the original thing eventually.
Maybe. But yeah, I mean, there's no recipe for it. You just go where the project takes you.
It's cool too when you see like teams get together. Like I think your crew was on like the Loser Kid podcast talking about their process of working together, and that's where I get envious of teams working together. I mean, I work by myself most of the time, like Dave and Eli are remote and stuff like that. But like the idea of like being in the trenches together, like meeting the guys that made the Saw game, I mean, that crew, they were so like, floating all boats to create the coolest thing amongst them and stuff. So getting to the point to where you have, even if it's just people that are coming by to play your game and stuff like that, like you almost have this accountability being like, all right, I got people coming over to test out my game and I didn't really get much further than when they were here last time. Now you're a little more motivated to like push a little bit further so that people can share in that journey. But like collaborating with people, like you have that idea that you want to see in the game, and then you get bouncing ideas around and everybody breaks for the night and you've got 3 new ideas that you didn't have before and you're so excited to bring those back. It's like having people looking at the same like problem to solve. It's almost like a writing room and like a screenplay or like TV shows and stuff. They're all working the same universe, same characters, but how can you make all that come together in a way that people enjoy? And I think that's one of the things, again, like you get a creative team together where people go, I can create the sound package that's going to support that experience. I need a snarky comment, like teasing you as you're playing. Like that's going to work well with, the stressful mode that we're working through over here. Like it's just, I love seeing that stuff come together because, when you find inspiration in unexpected places, like that's where like cool new stuff comes out. Like sometimes I see somebody make something so brilliantly designed in 3D and turn that into a physical piece that all I need to do is help make it move around. Like, I'm super inspired by that. And the idea that the whole project gets cooler. Yeah, I don't know. Like, just make cool stuff.
I know
I've done 2 presentations today. I'm like brain dead at this point.
You're asking the order of creating a game, and there really just isn't.
Right.
Yeah.
Every game is designed differently, and it depends on who you have on your team. If you're doing it by yourself, then you start with your expertise and you leverage the tools you have. You may design it in a visual pinball environment to see your ideas kind of come to life in a virtual environment, or you might just start with foam core and start putting shapes on a piece of wood. Or again, I'm sorry the answer's the same, but you just do it. You just start with whatever it is you want to design, and you just start designing it and see where it takes you.
Yeah.
One of the things I noticed both of y'all have talked about is like such importance of having a team and like creative people to bounce ideas off of. And then if you don't have that, but like say I'm completely new to this, what's the best way to get involved and find people that would actually want to work with me? Like say my friends aren't into pinball and they don't want to do any of that with me. Like how do I find like-minded folk to create with?
So I don't think you have to have a team. I think there are a lot of successful people building homebrews completely by themselves because they're driven. They have an idea, they want to see it through. They attack it from their expertise probably at the beginning, and then they learn. They force themselves to learn. And some people are just really good at that. Other people either don't have the time or they don't have the interest in learning another discipline, and then they go out and find people to help them or don't. And if they don't, sometimes the project stalls. But if they do, it sometimes turns into a really cool project.
No, and I think that's really true. I mean, like as much as I say, like find a team, all that good stuff. Like I like the camaraderie myself. I like being around people, but I'm always like shocked and impressed by the people that are the single force on their own that did everything start to finish. And you kind of go like, I had a lot of great time hanging out with my buddies, like goofing around, working on pinball. And this guy just sat down and did it. So it's not impossible to do it yourself, but like also to be successful as a person working on your own, you've got to have like that clear vision of what you want to make. That's what's going to keep it from being meandering all over the place for a long time. So I'd say the common trait I see with the people that are focused on doing it themselves, where they do most of the stuff themselves, is they've got a laser focused vision on what they want to see come to life, and they're not wasting a lot of time trying to figure things out. They're getting to work. And I think that's a difference that we're seeing now in a lot of the homebrew people that I'm meeting of late. It's the same kind of people that would be like buying a $3,000 drone that they put together themselves. The idea that like, I want a project that I can sit down, work start to finish on, and have a result. And I think that when we all got into homebrew stuff initially, it was like we were learning how to make all this stuff work, how to just get stuff running, And so there was that progression that was natural with us just like learning pinball, learning how to control things. Others are coming into it now going, pinball sounds like a cool project. This is what I want to make. How do I get started as quickly as possible? So there is like a different, I guess there's a different style of homebrewer showing up these days, which is cool to see as well. But
there's also nothing wrong with meandering through a project.
As someone who's never finished a project, I know the meandering.
Sometimes the best result happens through iteration and changing your idea throughout. And the opposite is also true. Sometimes someone does have that laser focus and that clear idea what they want to do when they build it, and it's fantastic. And the end result is exactly what they thought it would be at the beginning, and they saw it through and is wonderful. But a lot of things, we'll design games and it'll change throughout the process. We'll realize something doesn't work, so we have to change it, or the rules don't work out and we have to change them, or we come up with a better idea.
Or it's not fun in the end.
Or it's
like
not fun,
I did exactly what I wanted, and all right, now what do I do?
Yeah.
I always, coming from like the film industry, like I always relate making a pinball machine with like making a movie.
Okay.
Like, the big Hollywood style is like the Sterns, but then like on the indie level,
right,
is working with homebrew. And when we were making like our short films or something like that, like we'd bring them out to festivals and show them. And a lot of times it'd be like me by myself, like I made this with my camera on my own. I know nobody here, but I'm going to be vulnerable for a second and show this project in whatever state it is and accept the feedback that I get from it. That's really what I see happening here at Texas for the past decade since I've been coming and before. Like, can you guys talk a little bit about your experiences of seeing homebrew and grow through like the festival circuit of people coming out and bringing their games, and kind of some monumental moments from that sort of extra effort to put yourself out there, sort of thing.
I'd say like the idea of like getting in front of people and sharing your experience, like in the talk we did earlier, it's like that vulnerability, putting it out there. And I always try to say like, who's the jerk that's going to critique you and make you feel bad about your project? I mean, if you polled everybody in this room and said, how many pinball machines have we all made here? Like, you got a handful of us that might get up to 4 or 5 on their hand. But for the most part, in the homebrew community, people are either working on their first one or getting started on their second one, So the idea that like somebody's going to be like, you idiot, your approach is so wrong. Like, why do you even do this? Like, that person kind of sucks anyways. So somebody like that, you can just like roll it off and ignore that, because more often than not, people are so stoked to see that you're here, And I think that the idea of, you've got your game, it's barely running, it's barely in a cabinet, you had to pack it all up and bring it out to the show. We all know what it took to even get to that. Not only just the effort to make it, but the effort to find the time away from family, friends, work, all that kind of stuff to actually focus on a project like this, plus the effort that it takes to actually learn a new tool, learn new software, like write code, cut wires, all that stuff. You're gonna bring this in and people are gonna be like, oh, I remember when that was me. And there's an inherent like camaraderie and nostalgia even for the new homebrew people showing up and bringing their game. Like, I love that. I love seeing like the newer people like creating a nostalgic moment for the previously newer people. It is an environment where like, I've yet to see someone who's really like put themselves on a pedestal above like all the other homebrewers and say I'm better than any of you, because I think any of us, if we wanted to be critical jerks, we could tear down any project we see. But I'd much rather see like, I love the fact that these projects exist. I love the fact that it's inspired other people to do it. And I mean, we even see now like a lot of like families building games, like people working with their kids, like the Overwatch game like that Mike made. It was like, I got a chance to meet his kids. I mean, he wasn't even there. The kids couldn't be there the first day, and I walk up and we were doing an interview, and it's like, wait a minute, you're the kids. And they're like, who are you? I'm like, Aaron, I'm Fast. He's like, oh my God. And so I said, just expect to get random emails from strangers wondering how you can tell them how to get their kids building pinball with you. Because the idea of building a project with your kids, I mean, my son like runs our 3D printers, like builds things for me and stuff like that. It's a cool way to kind of say, I've got these projects going around the house. Like, how can I rope other people into that? And sometimes it's like, child labor is free when it's your own kid. It's not so bad, So if I can get him to run 3D printers and work for us, it works all right. Your kid's still young. You'll get there.
I'm still stuck on the fact that Aaron's never been on the internet listening to people critique him.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's all rainbows.
Let it roll off. I just let that roll off.
I will say too, like bringing a pinball machine to a show is really great field testing in whatever state that you're in, and us as the audience of your project, we love to see the growth of it too, and that kind of helps build your support as well, and you're kind of like building that community and hype in that homegrown sense, like first year you bring it in a whitewood state, the next year you have a little bit more coding, and then the next year you start putting on art and stuff, and then watching that every year build and grow has always been exciting for us to see. Now we have people making these amazing machines using like the Trident kit and stuff like that kind of helps fast track the creating of the pinball machine. But you walk through that homebrew, you don't even realize that they're custom one-off games unless you really know. Like, they stand next to a Stern or Jersey Jack game and look super professional, like, hundreds of people manufacture this and stuff. Like, how do you battle that? Like, now I feel kind of intimidated to even get to that level, because I don't know if mine's gonna look as perfect as that, or The Greatest Showman is absolutely beautiful. What you see on Jeffrey and Lisa Sue's little printout sign, like, they spent $16,000 on that game, and that's why it's so beautiful. I have like $500. Can I still build a pinball machine, or do I need to start saving up lots of money to get a project created, Like,
$500 isn't going to get you very far. Like, if there's ever a myth in pinball, it's like, oh, it'll be cheaper for me to build my own machine. That's straight up a lie. That is not the case. Like, getting into pinball and building your own thing, like, it is, like, you got to start looking at things as like, this is like my creative enrichment, or I'm learning new things. So you start looking at like, how much money would I spend on like, classes to learn new things? Okay, well, I'm going to budget that to spend on my own project. Or you start buying new tools and stuff like that. I mean, it ends up being a decent amount of money, but at some point, you get to a point in life where it's like, what the hell else are we going to do? We need an exciting, compelling reason to learn new things and have community and stuff like that. So, eventually, like, I think that, people get to the point where they feel comfortable sharing like how much they've actually spent. And I look at it as like, that is just an investment in like the enrichment of your own life, and that's not to be all cheesy, huggy, lovey about it, but kind of like that is what it's about, but it is not super cheap. And I got asked the other day of like, what was the thing that you think all homebrewers should know to avoid a pitfall? And I had to think for a second. And what I came up with was like, buy brand new coils like every time. Like, somebody gives you free coils, like nobody gives a free coil away that they know is good. If you get some free coils, that's probably in it might be good category, but I'd say a lot of times people will waste a weekend like messing around and it was actually something physically wrong with the coil. So you're gonna spend some money.
I think the cost associated with developing a game is relative to your end goal. If you want it to look like a professional polished game, then you're going to spend money on it. If you want to build a project because you think it's fun to create a pinball layout and make the features work together, you can do it for under $500. You can go get if you have the expertise and the drive and the desire to learn how to use a microcontroller and connect it to some switches and some coils, whether they're free or not free, I think you can do that. I think the end result won't be a commercial machine, but if that's not your goal, and it's not the goal of most homebrew developers, that's totally fine. And I think we should encourage people to just try stuff. Grab some scrap wood from your garage. Grab some wire. Grab a microcontroller if you have it and you know how to use it. And write some simple code. Make an LED turn on. Then make an LED turn on when you press a button. And then make a slightly more complicated circuit. And you can do that inexpensively. So if your goal is just to build a project, do it inexpensively. If your goal is to build something that looks amazing and functions and is going to hold up to the rigors of shows and road tours with your machine to show it off to people, then you're going to spend some money.
Yeah, for sure. Where do y'all see? I'd love to start. We're about 15 more minutes. If anyone in the audience has questions, please come up to the mic right there. You can just walk over and ask these gentlemen some nice questions. And where do y'all see kind of the future of homebrew going now that just what we've seen in the past few years in homebrew and what everyone's making? What's next for homebrew? Where do we go from here?
You want us to go into that, or do we want to take his question first?
Yeah, please feel free. Go ahead.
I mean, it can go anywhere, but basically technology continues to improve. People have more access to tools and to resources and materials to create bigger and better. I mean, the industry as a whole, you see games from all the manufacturers with more impressive presentations and more impressive toys and more impressive video displays. And homebrew is just going to run parallel to that. Yeah. And if people are talented making cool implementations, or they're software experts and can do really cool things with software, they're really good with video editing and stuff, they're gonna make amazing games. I think homebrew in some ways might lead manufacturers. You see a homebrew machine that does something you never thought of before, and the manufacturers are like, how can I turn that into a cool product?
Yeah.
Yeah, the idea of bringing new innovative ideas where you're not concerned about the bill of materials and what things cost and how you source them in higher quantities, like without that burden, you can pick up some cool mechanisms, some cool tech and stuff like that, and make it a driving force in your game. And that's what, like, I always kind of snicker when I hear people go, they see something cool that was done in a homebrew game that they'd never seen before, and you hear people go, why couldn't Stern make that, or why couldn't JJP do that, or something like that. And a lot of times it's down to, like, because it would be really expensive to do it if you had to scale it up that way. So there is some freedom to say, like, what would be really cool to see in a game, and if you don't have the burden of mass production, fine, you can roll with it. But I'd say also, too, the way technology and resources and costs and stuff like that works is eventually it'll get to be the point to where maybe that does get to be more affordable. We do see that stuff get worked into mainstream pinball. But I mean, I love when I see, like, all people from all the major pinball companies come strolling through the homebrew space. I mean, I love seeing that. I try to, as a favor for the homebrewers, is try and capture photos of, like, George Gomez standing over the Tony Hawk game playing that. I mean, that's a special moment as, like, the designer of the game. Those are really cool things to see. So, the homebrew people are not burdened by, like, that's not actually mass producible. Like, push the limits, inspire somebody to figure out how to get that thing on the bomb at a good price, and we start to see it showing up in commercial games.
What I wanted to say actually kind of ties into the future of pinball, which you guys just talked about, was I wanted to kind of talk about, and it's more of like an observation than a question really, but I'm interested in your feedback on it. It's more about my learning curve at the beginning of whatever it is I think I'm going to do here. And the learning curve is that I have an older machine that I decided I wanted to cut a new playfield for because there's not a reproduction playfield for it out there. And so I started teaching myself CAD and CAM in order to do that. And I've moved along quite far into that process. But the learning curve I found was lessened by AI. So what I've been able to do, and this is what my own personal findings is, I've been able to, if I have a problem with something that I'm doing, I can take a picture. Like, for instance, I had a problem with the shop bot at my local makerspace, interacting with the G code that I created coming off of Autodesk Fusion 360. So I took a picture of the shop bot, I took a picture of the Linux screen, I told AI what the problem was, and it said, if you would like, you can upload your G code and I will help you to try to fix that. So I copied the G code, put it into AI, and it says, here's the reason you're having a problem with the shop bot is because of this G code right here. If you would like, I can fix it for you. And so it fixed it for me. When I get back on Monday, I get to test that code when I get back home.
That's super cool.
And that's just one of a couple of things that I've found so far that it's been able to help me with, helping me save a lot of time, because you guys probably know that would have taken for me to try to figure out on my own what I had done in Autodesk Fusion 360 to create that problem. That would have been very difficult. And as kind of an additive on the back end of that, I asked AI, what can I do? What could I have done to prevent this problem in Autodesk Fusion 360? And it said, there's a problem with the .cfg file, I think. If you would like to download the Autodesk 360 CFG file and copy and paste that to me, I can correct that in there so you'll never have a problem interfacing with the shop bot in your makerspace ever again. And so, anyway, something to think about as you move on with your projects or whatever, that I think that as AI moves on, as it continues to evolve, it will be able to help as a teacher and also as an employee as time goes on to help to solve these sort of complex problems that you might find if you're working a problem alone. So I'm curious what you guys have seen of that so far, if you've dealt with any of that, or what your thoughts are.
What do you think of AI?
AI is a tool.
Yes, it's a tool.
A computer is a tool. A piece of software is a tool.
Photoshop,
and tools are getting better. AI is getting better. Everything that we have access to as a developer is getting better, allowing us to do bigger and better things faster. So I agree with you. It's just another tool that people can leverage to do their projects for sure.
I think the example you used with the G code analysis is like where it's so perfectly suited for. The idea of any of us crawling through G code and being like, oh, here's the problem, we're not tuned for that, But being able to give some context to show the device is being used, where it was originally derived from, and what the output device is, and then within that context, the questions it's asking you to say, would you like me to fix this, And what it thinks the solution is, you still need to try it out and see if it fixed it, But I do think that, like, the ability to say, like, something is wrong here. I don't even know where to start, but I think that's where AI is a really good tool for that kind of stuff. Like really working for generated instruction commands for existing tool sets, robotics, all that kind of stuff. Being able to take an existing set and say, I would love this to work a little slower right here. Or when it makes this move, do this instead. AI is so well tuned for that. So I do think that there's a lot of things that, I didn't really think about it as far as fixing G-code stuff, but I mean, that's ideal. That's great. What's your question?
We have a class back in Missouri where a bunch of these kids are trying to build a pinball. This was 2 teachers came up with the idea, and a bunch of kids took the class. How do we motivate these kids to try? Because a lot of them just simply don't care, isn't interested in it.
Great question.
Yeah.
How do you motivate them?
How do you motivate your kids, Aaron?
Okay, this is how I motivate my kids. You put a cool problem in front of them to solve. And I told my kids early on, I said, you'll never be limited by CPU power or like tools, okay? So I'm not gonna buy you a crazy cool computer just to see what you do with it, but if you're rendering and trying to create something and it's slow because of the computer, I will help you solve that. So I think that with kids, it's a matter of finding what it is they're interested and curious about and give them the opportunity to just get wrapped up in it and stuff. So using pinball as pinball is a STEM class in a box. All disciplines, like woodworking, metalworking, plastics, art, music, everything, And I think that one thing that I take really seriously is I like the education end of a lot of these things. I love opening people's eyes to new things that they can do. So one thing that I think would be really incredible to see in schools, my big idea that I want to see happen is to be able to introduce into a lot of these technical tech ed classes and stuff like that, where a lot of those classes spend time with their CNC machines and 3D printers just putting the file in and pushing print or pushing cut, and it comes out the other side and it's done. But for a teacher, they don't have a lot of the support to put in a lot of extra time on top of that stuff. So I always felt if you really wanted to use pinball as a STEM education tool, there needs to be a support system for the instructors themselves. So when they go, I got this one kid who's a total hotshot and he's doing this really cool stuff and I don't know how to support that, to be able to reach out to experts in different fields and stuff like that that would be willing to say okay, here's something you can do to address that. But I always felt if you could do a taster experience in a classroom setting and pair that with an after-school club, I always felt if you could do a quarterly pinball thing, or even if it's once a year, and the end result could be something that at least in my community, it's all about fundraisers and auctions and things like that. So imagine a class could work together with the art departments, with music groups and stuff like that, and make this finished pinball machine. And then at the end of the year, auction it off. And some restaurant or business in town would gladly buy that machine, put it on location, and now people are gonna come in to see the project their kids made. That would be super cool. And then that money generated can go back into the project and carry it on, So really finding the way to show them, here's just the tip of the iceberg. But the challenge is really finding room to let them wander around and free think in it. So that is a challenge.
Within their own interest.
Yeah.
Right. If you force something down somebody's throat, they're gonna reject it. But if you find the bit of the project that each individual relates to that interests them, somebody might like to draw, somebody might like to use their hands and build stuff. Or everyone's got something that pulls them out of laziness and intrigues them. If you can find those bits and pieces within the bigger project, I think you can get group buy-in.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
Nice.
I asked something similar to another seminar before, and I know there's no limit and I know there's no minimum, but I'm just looking for a general. Like you said, $500 isn't going to get it going. And the sign out there, they said, they spend $16,000 and who knows how many hours of time. But just a general, would you say, money that, okay, I'm going to start this, I got to have this in the bank. Generally, I could go over it, I could go under it, but just general.
What's your goal?
A game from scratch.
What do you want the game to look like when it's done?
I wouldn't say professional, but just middle of the road.
You want it to have professional-looking artwork, professional-looking mechs, working mechs that do cool things with a ball. You want a control system that is running complex software.
Right. All I'm wanting to do is, so if I ever start this, okay, I have this much money in the bank, yeah, I can start it.
I don't think I can answer that question. You could get there with $500, or you could get there with $100,000. It just depends on the people you need to help you get there, how much you can do yourself, what kind of tools are available to you. I know you're looking for a number to green light your project or whatever, but I don't think you need it.
Yeah,
I'll take a stab at that.
Hold on, I want to take a production stab at that. So anytime we're trying to work on a project, think about what is the budget you're willing to spend and invest into it, and then work backwards from there.
Yeah.
So if it's like an average pinball machine you could buy off the street is like used is maybe $3,000 to $5,000. If that's kind of the range that you're thinking that you're willing to spend on it, then now you're looking at this sort of hardware and this sort of software and these type of mechs or whatever and what you can do. Or if you can go higher, then now you can add that more production value. If you don't think you can spend multiple $1,000s on it, then like Jerry was saying, you could maybe get more crafty with foam, borrowed pieces, gifted pieces, 3D printing, that's a affordable investment to do stuff like that. So it should really start at how much are you willing to put into the project financially, and then work backwards from
And
there.
time. How much time do you want?
Time.
If you want your machine done in 6 months, you're going to pay people and companies to help you get it done. If it can take 10 years and you piecemeal it together over the course of that time, it doesn't have to cost much.
One thing that I see happen is people will say like, I've got like 8 pinball machines and stuff. I'm going to sell one of my pinball machines to fund my homebrew journey, So you see that a lot, and it gets to be like, what game do I want to sell? Can I generate like, $2,500, $3,000 or something like that? Like, that's going to get you like, you're in a good spot. I mean, when I was trying to pull a number out of my head randomly, I figured if you budget $2,500, like you're probably in a good spot to get a game that could physically play. Now, when you start looking at artwork and stuff, that's where it starts to go, are you hiring an artist? Are they going to come in and do this artwork for you? Are you going to get a playfield printed? You'll spend $1,000 on a fully printed playfield itself, But again, if you've made this physical game, you spend this $2,500, $3,000, whatever, and this game is a blast to play, that art package is the cherry on top. So the idea of like finding an artist that like maybe never made pinball before and thinks it would be super cool. We keep seeing new artists show up in pinball who are reached out to for their base skills. And now they're a pinball rock star. The idea of like, how do you create a pinball landscape? How do you deal with insert lighting and all that kind of stuff? But I guess the point is that like, I feel like you could get a pretty rocking pinball machine done for $2,500, $3,000. But then when you get into the art dress, you're hiring someone to do music, like that's your creative budget on top of that, So like Jerry said, it's like, how far do you want to take it? If you want to say, I've checked the box that says it isn't technically a pinball machine, you can definitely do that for way cheaper. But I think that what a lot of people are attracted to with homebrew is like, they see some of these games out there, or they're standing over a commercial game going, I think I could do this, or I'd like to take a shot at this. Clearly that's a different bar to try and achieve, But like I said, like it is the kind of thing that like whatever budget you want to put towards it, make sure it's something that you feel good about spending the money on. You're not going to be able to really sell that game in the end. We all know that you can put money into restoring a pinball machine. You put $700 in a fixing machine and sell for $3,000 more than you paid for it. We all know that pinball math. In homebrew, it's like, it's the blood, sweat, and tears that you're putting into it and what it costs to get that project all the way through. So I don't know if that helps at all.
I lost my voice, so I apologize about that. Partying too hard Thursday. So you have a general idea. You've got it mentioned a couple of programs. What is a good virtual pinball or visual pinball aid online, if you are open source, to kind of come up with a flow with a pinball machine? You mentioned P3, which I wasn't familiar with. I'm familiar with visual pinball, but what's the easiest to get like pop bumpers to work and so on and so forth?
I mean, the people that I know that use visual pinball most are like where they've got an idea for their game and they want to see, could this be fun? It doesn't map one-to-one with like the physics and geometry and stuff like that. But if you're like, hey, if I'm shooting this and this plus this plus this equals this and this is a good experience, you might be like, all right, I've reached the threshold. I want to make this into a real game. I don't know. I mean, any other thoughts?
Visual pinball is the one that everyone always talks about.
Gotcha. Well, you mentioned P3. I've just kind of Googled it a little bit, so Just kind of curious if you thought one was better than the other.
Yeah, cool.
Cool.
I will say too, it's not necessarily like I don't know how one-to-one it translates, but Pin Builder is a video game on Steam that you can download, and they've done a really awesome job at like the physics and geometry of it, and just like a Sims, like SimCity or whatever, you can build a pinball machine and kind of drag and drop parts and stuff on it. And to me, that was way more user-friendly than visual pinball, because just the layout and the UI of it. And it's a lot of fun because it's a video game, you know, it has that kind of dopamine and instant satisfaction and gratification for it. So if you really just like, let me just kind of really play around and not have to think so hard in my head on how to get just this program to start working for me, I would definitely try to check out Pin Builder over the weekend.
I've never seen that.
Yeah.
That's cool.
All right, I think that's it for time, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, Jerry and Aaron, for joining us too on the floor and talking all about pinball with us. Much appreciated.
If you have more questions, come and find us. Find us on the floor. And,
We'd love to talk about this stuff.
yep, true.
Yeah.
Thank you.